This is Do It for a Living, your source for inside information on the future of automotive performance.
Having your own business is one of those incredible rides and journeys that, you know, if you got the balls for it, everybody should just go for it and give it a try. You know, it's one of those life experiences that are you know, that change you, that are transformational.
What's holding you back from starting or growing your business into what it can be? Well, if you're listening to this, it's not a lack of information. What you're about to hear is all you need to get motivated and start making waves. Do It for a Living podcast details the journey of today's true players in their own words. Find out how they broke out so you can too. The time is now. The time is always now.
Because I don't feel compelled to do a lot of the hands-on now. You know, that for me to do a lot of the hands-on doesn't prove anything at this point. In terms of a design project for like new product, I'm there in the beginning with very detailed specifications, concept drawings, you know, explaining it exactly how I like, and then I'm there during the process, but only in a capacity to review. It's like, hey, get it to this point, and then let's circle back and let's review it, right? And so I'm using my brain. I'm using my ability to spot problems, you know, anticipate problems, and it's not just like functional problems. It's also manufacturing problems. Like, right. You know, a lot of the engineers or the guys that have drawing don't have the manufacturing experience. So I'll look at this part and, you know, it's one of those things. You've heard the term when all you have is hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So in our industry right now, the hammers are CNC machining and welding and fabrication. Right. That's everybody's go-to thing. It's either welding, fabrication, or CNC machining, or a combination of the two. Right. Like for me, I look at it and I say, okay, what's my projected? How many units do I plan to sell? You know, how much is it going to cost for me to do investment casting tooling versus permanent mold casting tooling versus hand fabricated versus forging versus, like, I'm looking at all my different manufacturing processes and I'm doing a feasibility study, basically. How many units do I need to sell in order to amortize that tooling back over X amount of time?
What is that X amount of time that you amortize the tooling back that you find is acceptable now, and has that changed over the years?
I like to. Well, my opinions changed now. Before I didn't know. So before I may have said, hey, I'd like to amortize that tooling in 5 years. You know. And,
okay. Wow.
Yeah,
really.
And now I'm like, if I'm not,
you want it faster.
Yeah. If I'm not amortizing in the first 2 runs, I'm going to make it a different way, you know. The first casting project that I did was the Type R manifold that fit GSRs. Yep. Right.
I remember it.
So back in that day, when I plopped down for that tool was over $100,000.
Because it's investment cast.
It's a permanent mold cast, but you know it's
unlimited life cycle.
Well, we had to rework the tool, but I've pulled at least 50,000 parts off of that tool. You know, okay. I didn't think that I'd be able to pull 50,000 parts off of that tool. I didn't expect that market to be that big. So it's funny because some people that live in the past or whatever, they look at Skunk and they say, hey, yeah, you just copied the Type R manifold. And it's sort of like, okay, from a certain perspective, you're absolutely right, because I never designed a manifold at that point. We started that manifold project in 1998, right? Or 97 or 98, shortly after, you know, somebody took the Type R manifold and grafted a GSR flange on there and threw it onto GSR and said, hey, this thing makes power. It's like, okay, well, how do we cast this? And
in one piece and make it scalable.
Right, right. And then how do we cast this? And then how do we design the flange so we could have the same exterior flange shape, but then be able to have holes drilled differently for LS and B16 and B18, right?
Yeah.
And so people don't look at that as innovation, but back then I basically identified a need that the market had, right? So GSR people needed the Type R manifold. right?
Mm-hmm.
And this was pre SolidWorks computer modeling stuff. So went from a Type R manifold, reversed engineered it into 2D prints, ended up making a set of tools, and plopped in at least 100,000. It was probably $100,000 for that tool back then. The factory we used was.
And you don't lose any sleep over that at that time? How anxious are you?
Well, it's in stages, right? So you pay 30% up front, and then you pay another 30% after the first article is approved, and then I paid another 30% with the first shipment, or 30, 30, 40, or 40, 30, 30, whatever. So it was broken up, and that project actually took a long time. That project took 18 months, almost 2 years, given the technology back then. So I look at it, and I might have critics out there and say, "Oh, well, look, Skunk just copied that back then," and it's sort of like, okay, that's a valid point, but I honestly didn't know how to design a manifold, but I had the fucking balls, right, to throw down that $100,000, and 50,000 people have benefited from that investment and that risky move that I made. So you can shut the fuck up, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's really kind of my attitude. If I want to play it off as like hardcore street thug, that's what I would say. Go ahead, argue that. Keep living in the past, because these days I design manifolds very quickly and I pop them out like, little bunny rabbits, You just got to keep growing. So for my critics or whatever, I don't worry about it too much, because I know what we learn and how we're growing each year, each day, and I know, what things we're still what things we're still developing and learning and designing and all these things. So it's like nobody, unless you work here, you don't know what my playbook is. You have no idea how good my game is,
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not going to be the guy who's just going to go out there and beat my chest and do all that. I've never been that way. And in fact, I've been content with the role of the Wizard of Oz, where, I hide behind the little velvet curtain, in my little castle, and I just do my shit. And it's just not until recently that I just felt like there's a need to say some things and inject some personality into this marketplace and give people, a different taste of, skunk.
I don't remember like the day or whatever, but all of a sudden I see David Sue is popping up. Anyways, you're popping up on my feed, and I'm like, this guy's fucking obnoxious. I'll be honest with you, right?
That's great.
But I was intrigued. Normally I would just be annoyed, but because of who you are, it has different context. Right?
Yeah. Well, I know where all the dark corners are, and I know where to shine my light and expose all the little spiders in the dark corners. And, I can take people down a journey and a path that they never thought this industry was. 20 years is a long time to observe this industry. So I think I've been fortunate to come in on the ground floor of the import boom and weather through the worst times. And, we've consistently grown in even the bad times.
Are you driven entirely on metrics, or are you a gut reaction person? More prevalent, one or the other?
I'm a gut reaction person. One of your questions that you had is, do I think of myself as an entrepreneur?
Yes.
When I started this thing, I wouldn't have thought that, but now after 20 years, I'm comfortable in embracing my strengths. And my strengths is I see things unfolding several steps before most people, so visionary. Like I'm looking down the road and I'm reading the tea leaves perhaps better than most people. And another strength of mine is, that I have this blend of right and left brain characteristics where I'm very creative, but I'm also very analytical. I don't know if it's because of my zodiac sign or my upbringing or my Asianness or what, I don't know, but it's just something that's inherent to to myself. Like, I can be very creative, but I can also be very, very analytical and very, maybe not analytical, realistic. You know, so when I'm doing a feasibility study, I'm running through so many more iterations than even a lot of the guys on my team. It's like, you know, I'm seeing, you know, I'm running through a lot of scenarios, both manufacturing, design, you know, sales, you know, channels, marketing, yada, 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 you know. So it's like my mind is constantly processing lots of stuff. So in that sense, I guess that makes me logical, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not like, my dad is like logical to the extreme. Like, I mean, his brain literally works like a computer circuit, right? Everything is a flow chart of yes, no, if maybe then, right?
Yes, right. Uh-huh.
So I am not that way. Like, so when you say hyper logical, I'm probably more logical than the average industry guy, but I am far from logical as a computer science professor.
Fair enough. I understand what that means. How about organization? No, I want to step back before I get into are you an organized person? Before I get into are you an organized person? How metrics driven were you from the ground level when you were first starting? Were metrics something that you constantly used to gauge your success?
No, because I don't know what the metrics were. I don't know what the metrics should have been.
Right. I don't know that.
Right. So
when you're in growth, it's hard to know that. Once it's stabilized and everything's got systems, it's maybe easier to measure.
That's just an experience thing, but different metrics mean different things at different times, right? So, for example, the first metric that I used when I started business was my aunt's a CPA up in the Silicon Valley, and so she sees a lot of startups, right? A lot of startups fail for the most part. Mm-hmm. And she just told me straight out, she's like, look, like I'm not doing your business or whatever, but you're my nephew. I'm going to just tell you that I think this is what I think. In 3 years, you need to break even. In 5 years, you need to be turning a profit. If you aren't breaking even in 3, you should cut bait. And if you aren't turning a profit in 5, you should cut bait, right? So this is coming from somebody who's seen a lot of businesses. And I think her point was you cut bait, not necessarily because you aren't making money. It's just perhaps there's other things where you'll get a greater return on your investment. There's other, you know, the opportunity costs of doing this business. You know, if you're barely making money in this business, what is the opportunity cost that you're leaving on the, you know, of being involved in this business? What are you leaving on the table elsewhere? You know, there may be great mechanics that start a shop in this industry, and you know they're hanging on for pennies, and they don't have health care, and they don't have health insurance, and all these things. But if they were to immediately switch and become, let's say, a line mechanic, you know, maybe they're super fast and they can flag way more hours than book time, and, you know, they got their benefits and they got their 401. So, you know, those are all opportunity costs of being in this business and barely getting by. So it's got to be worth your while. If you're going to do it, it's got to be worth your while, because you got it in you always have to have a plan B in your mind, right? So for me, my plan B was, hey, when I started the business, if it doesn't work out, I'll go back and I'll get my degree in architecture, and then I'll go make, you know, money in architecture. It may not have been, you know, a ton of money, but, you know, it would have been better than just struggling, you know, forever in the import tuner shop thing, you know?
Uh-huh. So many times people won't stop, assess their situation, and see the forest for the trees. They're so stuck in the forest that all they're thinking about is getting out of or navigating the forest.
Right.
Yeah.
Tunnel vision.
I see it a lot. Yeah.
Tunnel vision. I mean, you get sucked into this industry and it's everything, and then, you know, you get all myopic and nearsighted, and you don't see, like exactly what you said. You don't see the forest for the trees, and you don't see the other opportunities that are out there. You know, It should always be like, here's my goal for the business in X amount of years, and after that I go on to my medium-term goal and my long-term goal, right? So you got to have goals. You have to have an idea of what you want, and you know what? It's fine to have those goals as revenue, or better yet, have those goals as earnings, because revenue doesn't mean shit. If you have a ton of revenue, you got low margins, then it doesn't mean anything, right? So
people need to realize, like, great, I have $5 million in revenue. Well, great, your cost of goods is $4,900,000. So
right. So there is one goal and one goal only in business, right? And that's net profit. I'm just going to give it straight. No altruism, no romanticism, and say it's about being a happy motorsports guy for the rest of your life. If you're in business, the one goal is net profit. Not revenue, not any of that. Net profit. After all your expenses, all your taxes, all that other stuff's paid, what are you left with? Let's just talk about basic business and basic economic forces. It's free market forces. It's a free market. People have choices, right? So if I have a product and people don't have another choice and my product is that good, you know what tells me if I'm not winning is if customers aren't buying. As long as customers are buying, that means it's, they wanted it or they didn't have other choices, right?
Right.
So if I come up with something that's so innovative and people can't do it, if people can't help but buy it, that's the free market saying that I should be rewarded for my innovation. This is not a communist state. This is not a socialist state. This is, we're in a capitalistic society. People might want to argue whether that's good or bad, but I'm just saying in a car industry, it's like, the free market says you sell the product at the highest price the market will bear. And what the market will bear is based on all the factors of competition, the actual quality and innovation of your product, economic forces. Do you know what I'm saying? So
I absolutely get what you're saying.
Yeah, nobody's putting a gun to anybody's head and say, pay me money for my product. It's a choice that's made. Like I said, I'm an unapologetic capitalist. I believe in free market forces. I embrace free market forces. I seek to understand free market forces and I roll with it. And that's key to business strategy. See, this is where I argue free market forces. If they exploit it to the point where it's too far, it'll start to collapse on itself.
Agreed. So over time, the truth will...
Right, exactly. The free market is self-regulating. So if you have crappy product and brilliant marketing, you might get a bump. But have you ever seen a product life cycle graph?
I have. I haven't studied it, but yes, I've seen a product life cycle
graph.
It
basically looks like a heartbeat. It starts from 0, it goes up to a spike, and it stays up there for a little while. It comes down, and then it flatlines somewhere in the medium area, right?
Okay.
All marketing does is it delays or amplifies the effects of the natural product life cycle graph. So any product that we have is going to have an average graph that always looks about the same. Now, the way that we influence how high our peaks are and how low our lows go is marketing.
How do you use that in your business? Is that valuable as far as studying it specifically, or just understanding the concept is important?
Well, I know that every product at some point is going to come down, right? So there's always all the products peak, and you can't bank on the product continually going up or always staying at the peak. So you got to constantly find other products because you don't know where the products are going to settle ultimately. So if we take something like sleeve coilover, something that we've sold since 1998 or 1999. We got 16 years of product history on that. I don't do anything with that product except keep it in stock, and it just moves a certain amount, right? I can't spike it up. I can't spike it down at this point, right? So for me, that product, it spiked real big because I was the first one to do it. After ground control. Also, I never shared the story. Like after I came out with the product, I put it in the ads in magazines because that's all we had. We didn't have internet marketing.
I remember I was 17 years old at this time. And I remember when I was 17, I was buying my first big dollar, in air quotes, coilover system, right? Yeah. And that was ground control or Skunk 2 because I wanted a name brand one, right? So those were my two options. I remember.
Right.
I remember thinking those were my two.
Yeah, so we introduced it to the public at $250, right? Because I had no channel, so I didn't have to worry about WDs and undercutting them. I was direct to customers, and I basically sold it for $250 and blew through 800 sets in the first month, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen that spike, and then I saw it rampantly copied. Like everybody and their mother had a same version of our coilover, not so much the ground control coilover, but almost an exact duplicate of our coilover with different color springs.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw it go down and dip down, and then when it goes so low, people start losing interest and people start canceling it out of their lines. Then it came back up and just kind of held steady there and just kind of, an even plateau. Much lower than before, but it's still consistent revenue.
What do you accredit the copies to? Do you accredit your manufacturing resources out of country with making connections and selling your same product out the back door?
No.
How much?
Yeah, that wasn't the case at all.
Okay, so you don't ever fault your manufacturers as being shysty.
No, because I can't think of any manufacturer that's done that to me. I always find certified companies. I mean, these are people that have quality standards and ethical standards, and if they don't abide by them, they lose their certification. So, losing hundreds of $1,000s worth of certification over, ripping off a, 30-year-old kid playing with cars is just not in their mindset. That would be silly.
I've heard this story. That brings up two questions for me.
Mm-hmm.
I know of a particular manufacturer that manufactures something completely different, but still in this space.
Mm-hmm.
And their concern is that they don't have any one particular part of their line manufactured in the same factory. They would have one part done here and one part done here and then shipped somewhere else to be assembled so that that manufacturer can't skate it out the back door and sell it under a different brand.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying that that's not a concern for you? That's news to me. I don't understand why.
Well, I guess it depends what kind of product is and what level of paranoia that, you have. So if you're talking about a sleeve coilover, I mean, that part is so easily duplicated. It would be easy enough for my spring manufacturer to make a bunch of sleeve coilover or sleeves and sell it as such. But no, I mean, the most important thing that I learned over the course of dealing with all the suppliers and people overseas is you just have to find the right people that you trust and work well with. And you may get burned. I certainly did. That's my horror story. But I learned a lot from that, and, I still trust people. I mean, that story alone would have made people weary of anything overseas, but I could.
Please tell us that story. Is that the story? Is that your worst experience that you've had in business?
In 2003, I get this call from manufacturer overseas, and he goes, so the guy that was running Z-Speed, his name is James, and when I started Skunking, James was working for me, so he went from boss to working for me. I really considered him as somebody I trusted, good friend, worker. We would actually go out and meet with different vendors, and he would say, this is my cousin. So he would tell people that I was his cousin, right?
Okay.
Right? So you
have that relationship.
Yeah, we're like semi-family, right? And, but then 2003, I get a call from one of my CNC manufacturers, and he just I've had this number, but I've never called you. And I say, well, if you have a problem, why didn't you call me? He says, well, it's because you're James's cousin. I'm like, oh. The cousin thing's not working good for me right now, right? I'm like, I had an idea, something must have been wrong. I'm like, well, what's wrong? And he's just he's like, your cousin, James, he's just unbelievable. He's been grinding me on this price and blah, 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 blah. And, and he said that if I wasn't able to match, let's say, he would pull the plug and switch to another manufacturer. He's like, I've been selling it to you guys for, let's say 220, and we've all been doing good and making money. I'm going to lose money, if I sell it to you at 180. And all of a sudden in my head, I said, you've been selling it to us for 220? And he's like, yeah, I've been selling it for 220 for like 3 years now. I'm like, I thought I was buying at 320, And he's like, no, it's been like 220. It's like either 220 or 240. I'm just random numbers. I'm like, holy shit. Like the guy over there, I'm like, I can't believe it. Is James, skimming the till? Like, is he basically marking up invoices, like saying that he's buying at, 320 when in reality he's buying at 240 or whatever, right? So I started to ask him about different products, and he started giving me the cost on all these products, and I start busting out all my commercial invoices, and I'm looking at it, and like every single thing is marked up 20 to 40%.
Wow.
Right. And I'm doing millions of dollars of revenue a year at that point. And it's been going on for 4 years. And so I started calling up like all their information, every single product coming out of every single supplier in the range of 10 to 40%. Right. Okay, so at that time I was just getting ready to move my business to Southern California. So I packed up my house. I sold my house in Northern California. My wife was pregnant. We had a 1.5-year-old, and then she had a bun in the oven, and we were living in a temporary apartment until our house in Southern California was done. So, we went back to sort of the starting days of living in an apartment with, young kids type of thing. And it was just a hard time for me to be able to deal with that, right? And I also thought, I'm like, he said, I confronted on him, and then he apologized, and he's just like, oh, I'm sorry, like, I'll pay you back, and don't fire me, yada yada yada. And it was a lot of stuff.
Don't fire me.
Like, it was a lot of stuff for me to do. But you got to understand, he was my sole agent handling all my shit overseas. Right, so he's a linchpin.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm thinking, man, this guy's like, one side of me is still real sentimental, thinking, oh, this guy's like my cousin, or this guy's like my brother. We have this history. I couldn't have gotten here without him, yada, yada, yada. I got to give him another chance. And he kept saying, I'll pay you back. I'll pay you back. I'll pay you back,
So he didn't skate it saying, oh, no, I wasn't doing that. He owned up to it and said, yeah, that happened.
Well,
I'll pay you
how
back.
do you skate when you're caught red-handed, right? I mean,
who knows?
The documents are there. Right. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to give him another chance. And in that year, in the following year, from 2003, 2004, he adjusted everything. He adjusted all of that inflation out of the prices, right? So the cost was lower. But then, okay, so I moved the business down to Southern California. I'm thinking everything is okay. And then I get a call from my friend overseas. His name's Marty. And we'd always been messing with cars. And he's just like, hey, Dave, I got to ask you a question. I'm like, what's that? He's just like, what's the deal with, I wanted to sell your products, but then, James would never sell me your products. And then all of a sudden I see him, he has products that I don't think you actually make. I'm like, what do you mean? He's just like, well, James is selling D series valves and, B series valves and B series retainers and D series retainers. And I'm like, that's odd because I've never shipped them any product there. Like our valves and stuff were made in Argentina. and our retainers were made in-house in the United States at that point. And yet he's selling retainers and valves, skunk retainers and valves over in the overseas market, right? And so my friend just thought it was weird. And I'm just like, what the hell is going on, right? And I started digging again, and I realized that he was just back to his own, his old ways, right? And I was over there. When I found out, I went over there in December, early December. I got over there. Normally James would always pick me up from the airport, but I had somebody else pick me up at the airport, take me straight to an attorney over there who was a friend of the family, and gave him the case or told him what was going on. And we came up with a strategy of how we would handle this. And I started collecting all the documents that I needed to be able to file suit against him. Right. And that chewed up all of my December. I wasn't able to go home for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day because I had to go intercept a shipment at the port of skunk product being shipped to somebody else that wasn't my customer, right? I had to
And you can laugh about this now, but you weren't laughing at that point.
Oh, fuck, I was pissed. I was hurt and pissed, and, just the thought, because before it'd be like, oh, my wife and I, we go buy a Christmas tree or whatever, and like that year it was sort of like she's lugging around a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old at that point, and, the husband is not around to pick the tree. And so my wife literally went to a Christmas tree lot that was shut down on New Year's Eve and picked like the scraggly little Charlie Brown, Christmas tree. And that was the Christmas tree that they had that year. And I wasn't even there, so it's like just that imagery alone, that just fires you up. Like, I was just so pissed. I was just livid. I mean, that was like, emotionally painful, to deal with that. And because it's not only money, but like, you're having effect on, people that I love and type of thing. Right. Mm-hmm. So I was collecting all of the invoices from all the vendors overseas. And then, I needed to reconcile them with all of the purchase orders and then all of the payment receipts and all of that stuff from the United States. So I had my marketing director. I said, okay, Auto Salon is coming up first week of January. I told my accounting staff, gather up all this documentation that I require and have Frank, who was my marketing director, fly to Japan and meet me at Auto Salon so we can, get at least some productive marketing work done. But the main purpose of him going to Auto Salon was to bring me documents, right? Brings me about 70 kilos worth of, 2 suitcases full of paper documents, right? So we do Auto Salon and I'm, pretending to enjoy it, but, obviously I'm pissed to high heaven that I got to deal with this shit, and he goes back to the United States. I take the documents back to Taipei, and I'm just working on it, building this case, right? And finally, in the middle of January, because he didn't even know that he didn't know I was there. I sat down with him. I basically said, look, here's the deal. I know you've taken about this much. I have all the documents, so I'm getting ready to leave. I'm going to give you one shot at making this right? Either just pay me this much money, right? And we're talking the magnitude of about $500,000, right? Like, pay me this much money, and we'll just call it a lesson learned, and we just move on. You move on with your life, I move on with my life, and best of luck, no hard feelings, type of thing. But he didn't want to do that. He said he would, but then his wife, who was complicit, like she didn't want to, and she just dragged it on and delayed. And they would say, "Oh, we'll pay you," but when it came time to like talk, here's the hard number, time to pay up, it was like they would drag their feet. So I left Taipei. I had my attorneys file a civil action, and then I also had them forward all the evidence to basically the district attorney, the prosecutor, and filed a criminal action against him. And this lawsuit went on for 5 years.
Wow.
And that was the criminal side. Okay. So going to criminal court, and I'm not a fan of courtrooms. And even though I'm 96, 97% fluent in Mandarin, it's a different thing when all of a sudden you make me talk in front of mean looking judges in a courtroom, So it's like, wow, it's like, I'm nervous just from the language perspective. It's like, how am I going to say this? Because obviously I'm not as eloquent in Chinese as I am in English, right? So I was nervous, and it was like quite the experience. But they, so the first round in the court, they basically convicted him of fraud and embezzlement and forgery, and they gave him a sentence of 1 year in prison. Okay, both him and his wife, because they were complicit in the crime. But Taiwan's legal system is weird. If you get sentenced to 1 year, you can pay a fine to knock off a few months, and then, because it's your first offense, you knock off, a few more months, and then if your total number of months is less than like 10 months, then you don't even have to go to jail. They just let you off on, what do they call it? OR, own recognizance, right? And I'm like, that's fucked up. Like, here's a guy, he basically embezzled $500,000, made my life living hell, and he's able to walk away, pay a fine, like pay a $20,000 fine.
Is he forced to pay you back at least?
I think he would have been, but like court payment plan, he's just going to argue he doesn't have money or whatever, and go on the 50-year payment plan. Might as well just forget about it, But so I protested to the prosecutor. The prosecutor agreed, so the prosecutor appealed. And in the second round of courts, they sentenced him and his wife to 22 months. So both of them were looking to go to jail, like do hard time, like do at least 20 months of hard time, right? Mm-hmm. So they appeal, right? Third and last tries, like you can appeal. And basically all they appealed was because they wanted to settle, because if they settle with me, so it was all pre-planned. They knew that, they're going to roll the dice until the very last minute. They wouldn't cough up a dime until they absolutely had to, right?
Yeah.
Right. So at the very last minute, they paid up, and I just said, hey, you know what? Just move on. And I think about that now. Yeah, that was a lot of work. It was a lot of stress. The fact that they took so much money when I was trying so hard to build this business, my life didn't need to be that hard when I was building this business, right? And it's like, if I had that extra, 20 to 40% in cost of goods, that's just extra fuel for the rocket, right? Instead they're like embezzling money, and they're making me do it on tighter budgets or whatever, and that's just like, adding gravity to my rocket. Like, I was fortunate enough to have a big enough engine to, break the gravitational pull, right? But it didn't need to be as hard as it was if I just had those resources. So he was taking a salary and then also taking, bonuses and embezzling and skimming off the top. He made more money than I did in that period, right? So like in those early years of business, I probably only paid myself, $50,000 to $70,000.
What systems would you put in place now to avoid that situation?
When you do procurement, you can't let one guy do your purchasing. You have to
checks and balances.
You have to do multiple vendors, and you have to do multiple purchasing agents. Because if you always got one purchaser, especially if you're doing business in Asia, it's very easy for him to get a kickback. So if every factory if our purchasing staff tells every factory, look, your price needs to be competitive. We have multiple purchasing agents, and we get 3 quotes per product, from different agents, well, then they can't, they know they're in competition, so they can't give you a price that's got a lot of, slush built in it to get kicked back. Does that make sense?
It does.
Right.
What you're saying is the way that it's structured over there is that if you had one purchasing agent, he would be able to come back to you, David, in the U.S. with a price, and that price could have a kickback to that purchasing agent built into it.
If you got one purchasing agent and you're sourcing overseas, chances are there's a high probability that he's getting a kickback. Right.
Are the purchasing agents employees of yours?
Right. Yeah.
Or these are third people that are employed by Skunk too?
Yeah.
Or people that are third party? Like that's the offer of purchasing service.
I have an office in Asia, and I have a office staff and a purchase and a quality team over there. But that's the way that you get around it is you do. So I have my team over there shop for quotes, and then I have my team over here shop for quotes. And it has to be competitive. Otherwise, if you're building in a lot of headroom for kickbacks and stuff like that, you'll never get the job because your quote won't be competitive. And even if so, it's like one of those things. It's like ultimately, I'm not going to worry about the kickback because I'm going to build a system where even if there is a kickback, it's so meaningless or so nominal.
It's better than the other team's price anyway, so you just choose the lowest price.
Right. Well, you just have to have a system where if they do a kickback, it's pennies and not dollars.
Right.
Right. And, it's one of those things, maybe I'm just putting my head in the sand, but you can't have perfect clarity and resolution into every part of your business. All you can do is have the right system and the right amount of checks and balances where even if something went haywire, it could never get out of control. Or even if there was some unethical behavior, it would never be at a point where it was really meaningful, where it could, kill the business.
So awesome.
It's like a realist perspective. Obviously, when I was going through all that, I fucking hated everybody on the planet that ever offered, gave, took a kickback, right?
Yeah.
But you have to look,
seeing red.
Right? Because they're just like, man, that penny should have been mine, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's sort of like it's my fault for not having the right system in place that allowed them to steal dollars, right? If I have the right system in place and all they're doing is taking pennies and I'm making millions of dollars and I'm getting good service or good work out of everybody, I'm not going to sweat the pennies, right?
Would you recognize the importance of business systems having not gone through that experience?
I wouldn't.
You think you would have got there eventually anyway?
I wouldn't have understood how to navigate that until I really realized how they were doing it and people's mindset over there. So when you deal with Asian businesses, there's a lot of kickbacks going on. So a lot of companies here, they'll buy stuff from a trading company. My guess is even the purchaser inside of the trading company is probably getting a kickback. Especially if it's like a commodity product, like, something that any factory can make. If any factory can make a product, then, think about what are the factory's strategic tools that they can use to win business, and one of them is kickbacks. So I can't blame them because it's, once again, a free market reality.
So there it is on the other side of it.
Right. Think about it. If you were a factory and you're making stuff and there's 20 other companies that made the same thing, but you knew you could get the job by greasing the purchaser's palm by, giving him, I don't know, a golf pass or, a gas card or, you can define kickback as a lot of things. Right? Mm-hmm. It could be a fruit basket, and then underneath the fruit basket, there's a few bucks underneath. It could be a trip to Hawaii, this and that. If you're talking about the only competitive advantage that you have because everybody's doing the same thing is the size or the of your kickback, then it's just it's natural.
That goes back to the race to zero. There's a lot of commodity products in our industry.
Yeah. Oh, I gotta continue with the story. So you understand how it's a bad experience, but I don't think I've really gotten to the real bad impact that it's had on me. Okay, so all I've told you right now is $500,000 worth of financial impact, which I got back, right?
Okay.
And then obviously the emotional stress or just the stress of having to deal with it, right?
Right.
Well, James and Z-Speed basically went on to make products for a whole shit ton of competitors of mine in the marketplace, right?
Uh-huh.
Right. So I'll just name a few. There's he was making stuff for Buddy Club. He was making stuff for Blocks. He's making stuff for Omnipower. You know, he was making like all sorts of companies that sort of popped up in 2004, 2005 timeframe that had a similar product offering to Skunk. He was basically taking everything that he learned, and all he knew how to make was our product, right?
Yeah.
And making essentially duplicates of Skunk camber kits to Omnipower, and making duplicates of Skunk camshafts to Blocks and Buddy Club, and even to this day, he supplies parts to the Blackworks companies, So I've basically created my biggest competitor at that point, and I was fighting them on multiple fronts. So, I don't mind competing in fair competition scenario, but that was clearly a unfair competition scenario, right?
Yeah, theft.
Basically took all my manufacturing secrets and trade secrets and applied them to other brands, and then everybody started marketing stuff as like Skunk. So you can see how it's a bad thing. Like, if honestly, I think about my decision. My decision was pay up and I'll let you off the hook. And now if it was me, I would be like, go to fucking jail. Do not pass go. And pay me my money when you get out, because he created just so much downstream chaos and problems. And, I think probably in 2005, 2006, you had a lot of people that said, oh, yeah, Skunk just buys, all this stuff from the same people. That's why, Omnipower and Blocks and, all these people have the same stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And that was totally a misconception. All that stuff that we had was, for the most part, all designed by me. And then, my one employee overseas does all this shady stuff and now is making all of my designs for other people. But at the time, I didn't understand patent law. I didn't understand, how to go about protecting, or the importance of going about protecting designs. Mm-hmm. And honestly, it wasn't that important then, because my only competitor actually came out of my own organization, right? There wasn't a ton of Chinese copy stuff in 2005. So my main competitor at the time, and they made duplicate intake manifolds. So the one that I took the plunge and gambled 18 months of development time and $100,000 worth of tooling, he just whipped up and made another copy of the tool before. So in 2003, when I didn't fire him, that was like his main project, was to make tools for cams and make tools for manifolds. So if I was to kick myself, I kick myself for not firing him, just cutting off ties in 2003. Maybe I was not confident enough that I could manage it. Maybe I was maybe I was functioning in fear or whatever, because I had so much other stuff going on, right? And then my other mistake was not just having them go to jail. Because I would say the downstream effects that he had was, obviously he's put in a lot of competitors, right? So it just
dilutes the market,
right? And they sell it for cheap, so they've commoditized a lot of stuff that used to sell really well that I had an exclusive handle on. So I would say probably over the years, the net effect of his behavior is, certainly north of the millions.
Yeah,
no doubt,
for sure,
no doubt. Yeah. But like I said, it's also the best experience, and maybe I'm just looking to make lemonade from lemons, but I tend to be an optimistic person, but I have to look and say, what why is this the best experience? Is because if I can survive and thrive and grow and adjust my strategy and my game plan in the face of unfair competition, then fair competition becomes easy for me. Right? So that's where I'm at now. Because of all that stuff happening, we really had to like beef up, tool up, strengthen our engineering and design capabilities. We had to make product changes, product modifications, product improvements, and we did it in a very short period of time. We had to, because of his existence, he accelerated the product life cycle of the product maturing. Like, you know, he drove the dip down lower than it should be, and he drove the where the product sort of settles out at lower than it should be, right? Well, knowing that that would be the case, I had to come up with new products, right? So, like that during that period of time, it was like a flurry of activity. I, you know, came out with like new throttle bodies, new camber kits, came out with the Scug 2 control arms that are so widely copied now. That was all in the thrash of you know, making sure that we're able to stay on top in light of unfair competition. Forced me to evaluate, you know, what's our competitive advantage, right? And so essentially him making the same stuff for somebody else, there wasn't, you know, I looked at it and there wasn't much competitive advantage that I had over him in terms of the product. The product was pretty much the same because it's duplicating our product.
Yeah.
Right? But
so what was going to be your differentiator?
Well, we established that very on. He's got that trading company mentality, and I'm a true motorsports guy, you know. So I just put my creative hat on and came out with the new camshafts and came out with the new lower control arms, came out with new throttle bodies, and then came out with, you know, different shocks and things like that. And so we really we slowly started to separate ourselves from those other brands. If you look at our product mix now, as well as all the products that we're coming out with, it's different than, you know, the Blackworks or the Blocks or, you know, the Buddy Clubs or whatever. They're kind of stuck on my old shit, you know? So that's why I say it's a positive thing because, you know, my blade is sharp and it was forged in the fires of unfair competition, you know, which is a hotter fire than you're going to find in regular competition.
Specifically, so you're talking abstract, your blade is sharp. What systems, people, strategies changed to sharpen your blade? That's more question than you can probably answer in a short period of time, but
really embracing technology and really embracing engineering. So I would say prior to all this stuff happening with James, I was doing all my engineering drawing on pieces of paper and I was sketching them out with pencil. So I don't know if I'm lucky that I could pretty much do a technical drawing that somebody can manufacture off of, you know, with a piece of paper, a pencil, and a pair of calipers. I could do a drawing and do all the projections and do all the you know, orthogonal views and all that stuff by hand. So, you know, I could give that to a factory; they could make it. So I'm fortunate.
Right.
I'm fortunate to have that skill, but. In early 2000, then we started to utilize, you know, CAD. We started using parametric modeling. You know, I hear people in the interviews talking about they bought a new, you know, they bought a 3D printer or whatever. I bought my first 3D printer in 2004. I actually had two of them. You know, I had a small size one and a large size one. 3D printers now are probably like $2,000 for a little one, you know. Back then it was a big deal. 25,000. I think our big 3D printer was 250,000.
Wow.
So it was like investing in stuff. We invested in CNC machines. We were making prototypes in house. I got my first CMM arm around the same time, around 2004. Got a Roamer, and then probably in 2006 got another arm with a laser scanner on it. So I started to really just like embrace technology that would allow me to create better things.
Now you invest all that money into technology and being able to get things, I guess, to market faster and design things more accurately or better or whatever. How do you protect it?
Patents.
Okay. And that was something that you weren't versed in, obviously, when you're first getting started, but that was part of sharpening your blade?
Yeah, I mean, from when you expose a design to the general public, you have 1 year to put your patent application in. That's just the law. So obviously I couldn't go back and try to patent all this stuff that was being copied because, the time limit had expired years and years and years and years ago. Right. Now, as part of our development process, applying for a patent is part of our standard operating procedure. It's just one more thing on the engineering checklist that gets done.
I just love hearing how it was off the cuff, and then over time, it's just natural progression, right? Like you've
Kaizen.
Yeah, sure. You've just gotten better.
Yeah, I know how the game works. I know, how to protect myself before I'm attacked, I guess,
Did that experience make you more ruthless or just more aware?
Well, some people accuse me of being shrewd or ruthless or whatever. I don't think that's it. I just, like I said, it's like business is this emotionless thing, the free market is emotionless. What I mean by that is the market doesn't care if you survive or don't survive. It's not going to shed a tear for you when you go bankrupt, right? I mean, as a business owner, all you can do is watch out for your business, your people, yourself. Nobody's going to shed a tear for you when you go out of business, right? So I'm going to make decisions that are guided by, I keep saying this, I'm going to make decisions guided by free market forces, right? If I'm too expensive, the market will reject me. If my quality or product sucks, the market will ultimately reject me, right? So I need to sell at the highest price the market can bear within the basic laws of supply and demand. So if I have a shortage of products, hey, that might be a good time to raise prices because I can only make so much. Like every dollar that I've made, for the most part, has gone back into this business, right? So if you look at us 20 years ago and then 10 years ago, we're a better and better and better company where people actually think that we are the Goliath now. We are far from being the Goliath. We're very small. We're very dynamic. We're very fast moving. We're just smart about how we do stuff. I think I've always been smart about how I did stuff because I started this business from my aunt's garage, back in 94, 95.
Mm-hmm.
Started with 12 grand of my own money, and then when it looked like the 12 grand was moving okay and I need a little bit more money, I borrowed like 20 grand from my parents, and that was how it started. Come up with a good plan, stick with the good plan, and enjoy the ride. There's not a whole lot. Once you have the plan and you have it in motion, there's not a whole lot you can do. It's going to do what it's going to do. You can try to accelerate it a little bit, or it might get delayed a little bit, but it's probably, you're probably not going to have that much of an effect once you have the right plan in place and it's kind of going along. You know what I'm saying? It's like all the effort. If we reference Good to Great, they're talking about the flywheel effect. It takes a lot of effort to get the flywheel going, but once you get the flywheel going, it just goes. You barely have to touch it, and it's just going to do what it's going to do.
But you just keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing on the flywheel in the same direction until the momentum starts to build.
Right. And then you just got to build a big flywheel. So it stores a lot of energy, and make sure that all your systems that support your flywheel don't fall apart. If you got a giant flywheel, don't use shitty bearings, type of thing.
What is your big, hairy, audacious goal? Speaking of Jim Collins. What fires you up in the morning?
I'm in this great place where I can just kind of explore, you know, and that's the best place for me to be, you know, in a visionary, exploratory, you know, bright idea mode, and just go from there. I don't know if I have a big, hairy, audacious goal. We have a lot of badass products we're working on, you know, that's for sure. Recently, it's obviously we've been making a stink about getting back into racing, you know, because I look at a lot of the race stuff out there and I'm just like, Jesus Christ, you guys haven't progressed very much in the last 10 years, you know, sort of like I've been focusing on business, you've been focusing on racing, and you've only gone this fast, you know, so yeah, I had a conversation, like Norris was out here, you know, and we were eating lunch and I had this conversation with him. I said, you know, the difference right now is we have two different point of views. You're thinking, oh man, I've been at this for 10 years and I've made all this progress and it's going to be really hard for you to come back in the game and, you know, beat me. And in my mind, it's like, man, it's been 10 years. This is as far as you've gotten. Like, give me 6 months and I'll get the job done. The way that we're approaching the race car today is so much more technical than it was 10 years ago. You know, before there was SolidWorks, you had these ginormous, you know, CAD packages. You had CATIA, you had Unigraphics, and, you know, those were like $1 million packages. And all of a sudden, like SolidWorks comes to the table, or AutoCAD Inventor, it's like $5,000. And, you know, maybe somebody's got a bootleg copier that cost them $20. I don't know, you know, but that basically the $1 million technology is available to them now, you know. So before you had CAD CAM solutions like CATIA, that was, you know, it had a CAD component and had a CAM component, and now you have SolidWorks and Mastercam that you can get for, you know, $5,000, and it pretty much does the same as what CATIA did 10 years ago. It does more, I should say, a lot more.
Okay.
But big, hairy, audacious goals. None really. Just keep making great products. Enjoy the process of making great products. And for me, you know, only doing stuff that I'm interested in. Before, I had the big, hairy, audacious goal to retire when I was 40.
Okay.
Yeah, and
would you even want to retire now? Like, I mean,
honestly, I think...
Like, what does retire mean, right? Does that mean just do nothing and sit my ties? Like, that's not a good thing.
For me, retirement is having the option not to go in the office every day. Right?
Right.
Like,
and still maintain the same quality of life.
Right. Like, having the option to not work. You know, so as for all intents and purposes, I'm retired right now, but I just love what I do, so I still come in. But I proved last year that I don't need to come in. Like, I could probably manage this organization like 1 month out of 12. Good people. You know, I can't stress that enough, is you got to have good people. They're hard to find. You know, in Good to Great, it talks about how when organizations are trying to go from good to great, they have high turnover rates. They're not afraid of turnover. You know, I believe the book says like some organizations would have turnover rate as high as 55% until they started getting a more and more solid core of people.
Because you have to get the wrong people off the bus and the right people on the bus in the right seat.
Yeah, and you don't even know until you try them out, right? So, like, don't be afraid to hire. Don't be afraid to fire. You know, that's one of those things where when I started business 20 years ago, it's like, oh, I'd keep a shitty employee on forever, you know, it'd take me 4 years to get the nerve to like, oh, finally, like at the last straw, I got to fire him. Right. So I'm a big softy there. Sort of like 90 days. I'm just like, hey, you know, it's not working out. And like my other managers come and they watch me let people go, and they're just like, man, I don't know how you are so polished at letting them go. It's like, you know, that must feel good about being fired, you know. And it's just an experience thing. You can't take it personal, and you know, that's one thing. It's like, yes, obviously it's your business, so it's very personal to you. But when you're interacting with people, you can't take it personal. That's where I'm saying, like, the emotional side of it doesn't really have much of a place in managing or handling your business.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Right. So if you got a guy who's not performing, like, I could give a shit about his personality or what it's like or whatever. That has zero effect on, me or the business. It's sort of like, is he doing his job or is he affecting morale? Those are the two things that I look at, right? If you're doing your job, you're good. And, you can be as weird as you want. I don't care. It's nothing personal. But if you aren't doing your job and I let you go, it's sort of like, I don't think you're an asshole. I don't think you're anything. I'm letting you go because you weren't performing.
Boom. Hyperlogical.
I don't know if it's hyperlogical. It's
not.
It's the fact. You just can't. You can't argue with that.
So true. People are way too emotional. I'm not even going to go into it. Let's not even go there. Look, we like to take action on Do It for a Living. Can you suggest one action item for our listeners that they can do this week to improve their situation?
Well, you got to have goals. I'll give you this goal that I had always when I was young or whatever growing up. I'm like, I want to have a net worth of at least $1 million when I'm 30 years old. That was just kind of like a goal. And it wasn't like it's all about money, but money is almost the most objective gauge of how well you're doing. So even for an executive, if he's out there, a junior executive might aspire for, $100,000 a year, and a senior, president or vice president level guy should be aspiring for $500,000 a year or whatever, because that's just a validation of your skill set. So I don't look at it as like I'm trying to create wealth or I'm trying to be rich or whatever. It's like it's almost like the easiest way to measure like career success. I just don't want people to like listen to this and say, "Oh man, all he cares about is business." Like, no, I'm a realist. I know what business realities are, right? And I've experienced the highs and lows that come from business. I think having your own business is one of those incredible rides and journeys that, if you got the balls for it, everybody should just go for it and give it a try. It's one of those life experiences that are that change you, that are transformational, for the better or worse. Mm-hmm. Even if you shut down your business, you're going to learn so much about yourself and reality if you do it,
Yep.
But yeah, I'm a student of business because I respect the free market, and I know I have to understand it if I don't want to get bulldozed by it, right? If I want to learn how to ride this bucking bronco, I better know, its nature and learn some skills to do it. There's a whole other side. It's funny, some of your other interviews talks about like, how did you do all this, how did you learn how to do tuning, or how did you learn how to do this or do that?
The technical side.
We haven't even talked about what I do technically,
Right.
Which I find very, very interesting. I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, because people probably think now I'm just like this book smart business person, which, which I am far from being,
Well, we dove right into the first thing, which was the architecture and the segue into 3D product design.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is your technical background then? I mean, talk to me about your technical credentials. What's on your technical resume?
Well, like I said, I can do I could freehand technical drawings. So I could give me a piece of paper, a pencil, and an eraser, and I can pretty much draw you something that's manufacturable, and I can dimension it, I can tolerance it, all on a piece of paper, and I can draw assemblies and stuff like that. So what somebody would do in CAD, if it's a simple enough project, I could probably just sketch on a piece of paper and get it done even faster. So yeah, in that respect, my brain works very well for this industry, because I can envision a part, draw it, dimension it, send it off, get it prototyped. And that's been the case, prior to using computers. Along the way, as an architect, I did stuff in CAD, and there was no 3D CAD at that time when I was doing it in architecture. So when 3D CAD came along, I took all the certifications. I'm whatever certification that they have in SolidWorks, I have that. And it was just really easy because, already very comfortable with technical drawings. Some other things I do, I can fabricate a car chassis, weld, ground up, bodywork, port heads, build engines, design camshafts. So quite a bit of stuff.
Where does the design camshafts experience come from?
Oh, okay. Very good. So I'm an engine guy, right? The only stuff that really interests me when I'm doing stuff seems to be the engine stuff. Like, it's funny because you interview a bunch of tuners. I've never taken an interest to tuning a car because I feel like there's plenty of people that can do it. I'm more interested in the mechanical design of it, and I've been fortunate to have a lot of mentors in that area. So I have people that I would consider mentors in the business side of things, but I also have people that I consider mentors from the engine side of things. In terms of learning how to design a camshaft, when we first started doing camshafts, I obviously had no idea how to do camshafts. There's very few people that actually know how to design camshafts.
I've heard that from over the years.
Right. And so I was actually trying to work with an outfit up in Northern California. They're called Megacycle. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
Nope.
Megacycle in Santa Rosa, California, specializes in motorcycle stuff. The guy there, Jim Dewar, I believe he's got a master's in mechanical engineering from Berkeley as well. And, the way that I found out about him was a friend of mine that worked at Comptech. Do you remember Comptech?
Oh, yeah.
Right. A friend of mine that worked at Comptech, I needed cams done. He's just like, well, we use Megacycle. Go talk to this guy, Jim. And so talked to Jim, and he did all of our early camshaft profiles. And then when I wanted to make more profiles, he was really busy he basically did all of like Joe Gibbs Racing stuff back in the day. I don't know if he still does now. He was doing camshaft design for Cannondale's motorcycle project. He may have done stuff for Greg Anderson, Jason Line, a lot of guys, all very hush-hush on the down low. Nobody would ever know, type of projects. Mm-hmm. And so he couldn't do my stuff, or he would always just push me off, and I finally just said, look, if you can't do it, just tell me you can't do it, but at least point me in the right direction to somebody that can do it, and so he gave me a couple names, right? And I contacted him and I talked to him, and I picked a guy, right? He goes, well, I can do it for you, or I can teach you how to do it. I'm like, oh, hell yeah, I want to learn how to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that guy was Harvey Crane. Does that name ring a bell?
Not to me.
All right, he founded Crane Cams.
Okay.
All right, so he's inducted into SAE Hall of Fame and SEMA Hall of Fame. Basically, I would say he's the godfather of, camshafts in the United States. He basically came up with the 50,000th lift duration measurement
rule,
yeah,
right? For duration, right. Yeah.
He came up with that, came up with a bunch of super innovative stuff over the time. But, he was the founder of Crane, which is at one point was the largest camshaft manufacturer in the United States. And when I met him, there's a long story there, but when I met him, he was, for all intents and purposes, retired. And he had a camshaft school that he would teach people. And so what he would do is he said, pay me X amount of dollars for my software, but with each $100 that you spend on my software, you get 1 hour of consultation, right? So I essentially bought like $6,000 worth of software programs that gave me 60 hours of one-on-one instruction with the guy, right?
That's a killer deal.
Yeah. And
I'd pay that right now.
Yeah, so he was retired, so he only worked half a day. So he'd only work 4 hours a day. So it was like, and he didn't work weekends. So how many, Like it was basically 3 weeks. I flew out to Daytona Beach, Florida, stayed in a hotel, and I went to his house every single day for 3 weeks, except for weekends. And I got a schooling on camshafts from ground zero. You know, everything I went in thinking I knew about camshaft was, you know, promptly bulldozed to the ground, and then everything was reassembled properly from the ground up. So that's how I learned how to design camshafts. And then after that, I would go visit them every year, kind of refresh every year, maybe go out there for a week, like every year. And we became friends, because I was probably only one of his students really focusing on oscillating arm systems. So like the Honda stuff, you know, the finger followers that we have, you know, it's basically, technically it's called an oscillating arm follower system. So I was one of his, like most of his clients were all, you know, push rod type of guys or flat tappet type of guys. And I was like the only one really focusing on oscillating arm overhead cam stuff. And, you know, it got to the point where he trusted my work enough where he would actually send people that needed work done, you know, to me to do stuff. But,
such as camshaft lobe design?
Yeah, or analysis design. And, you know, it's very few people know how to do it. And it's funny because the designers that know how to do it pretty much all have like signature designs. Like you can look at, I could look at the acceleration graphs of different camshafts and kind of like say, oh, I know who designed this, or I know who designed that. You know, so we just start looking at it a little bit. Like if you look at camshaft data, it looks like the matrix. It's all just numbers, right? You know, you're talking about acceleration values that are like 0.0003, you know, inches per degree square, whatever. And it's just a lot of numbers, a lot of decimal points, you know. And eventually it starts to take shape where you see the woman in red, you know, so to speak. You can look at the numbers and kind of know what the camshaft's going to do or how it's going to behave. So yeah, that's one of those super high-end skills that I've accumulated over the years, and it's fun because not that many people can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
super technical.
Yeah, I have had a lot of mentors on the engine side, you know, so pretty confident in my own stuff at this point.
Well, I'm curious to see how it pans out with the race car resurrection.
I'm not worried about it. Go. So here's the funny thing. I mean, you talk to me and you say, oh, he's a pretty smart guy or whatever. There's a guy here in the office that I consider him technically smarter than I am. You know, so when I have a guy like that to riff off of, it's sort of like, you know, we're double trouble. You know, to the competition, when you put us together, we're double trouble.
Sure.
You know, so it's going to be fun because we're both doing it for the love of it at this point, because we have a lot of business tasks that we have to do. You know, right now our biggest project right now is a Harley Davidson supercharger. And we've been working on that for probably slightly over 2 years at this point. And it's really just a beautiful piece from an artistic perspective, but also from an engineering perspective. And we took it out to, like the V-Twin dealer show in Cincinnati, Ohio. And, people looked at it and they're just like, oh my God, this is like the most innovative thing that we've seen in the Harley Davidson space, you know, over the last 30 years. We had a lot of famous old timers in the Harley space say, wow, this is going to like revolutionize it, you know. And
so that's something that's got you fired up. 2 years.
2 years. Yes. You know, there's like 180 parts in it or something, like, so it's from a industrial design. We had to make it look really beautiful because people take so much pride, and like every Harley Davidson riders take so much pride in just the looks of their bike. So we had to design something that was sympathetic to the looks of the Harley Davidsons. It had to be very beautiful. It had to be compact. It couldn't be like big and bulky and stick out, you know, and like push your leg way off the side of the bike. You know, it had to make power. It had to be easy to install because, you know, the Harley crowd really isn't like, you know, super technical. You know, so I'm a big Einstein fan. Einstein says, any intelligent fool can make something more violent and complicated. It takes a genius to make things simple, right? So we basically took something that could technically be very complicated, and we made it appear to be very simple, even though it's very complicated.
Nice.
Yeah.
Pretty proud of that project?
Yeah, I would say that project is the culmination of everything I've learned the last 20 years. You would have to have more skill, more talent, more creativity, and more engineering abilities than my team to be able to make something comparable. And everybody who's seen it has been blown away by it. So I know it's a departure from the Honda business or whatever, but it is one of those projects that we all take a tremendous amount of pride in, and it's one of those projects where you say it's a big, hairy, audacious product.
How do you bridge the gap when your brand is recognized somewhere else? Do you create a new... I guess how important is the marketing strategy? So I would say that the average Harley consumer doesn't want to be affiliated with a Honda product manufacturer. Right. How much of a concern is that?
It's not branded as Skunk.
Right, I know, but Kraftwerks, for example.
Well, Kraftwerks is branded as a supercharger company, so we have Honda, Miata, BRZ superchargers, but we also have Camaro, Mustang, Jeep, Harley Davidson.
Okay. Right.
And it was funny, when we went to the show, we thought that people would be, allergic to this idea that we came from the import world, but it was actually the exact opposite. We had a lot of people say, well, if you can figure out those complicated...
newfangled imports.
Right, if you can make power on a Honda and make it good product, I'm confident that you're going to be able to make something good for the Harley Davidson. I'm not worried about it,
That answers my question perfectly.
Yeah, but then we also get the same people who's like, hey, where's this made? And it's like, well, the supercharger's made in Denmark, and then the other stuff is made in Asia, and then we assemble it in the United States. Oh, that's all I need to know. I need to walk away, like, all pissed off. Like, okay, go enjoy.
As he drives home in his Toyota Camry.
That's right. Go enjoy your slow bike, because you know what? I'm making a game changer. I'm positioning the product to get on a lot of bikes. I want thousands of bikes every single year with the supercharger, and it should be huge.
How do you reach those markets? As a product that needs to be installed, can it be installed by someone in their garage, or does it need to be installed by a dealer?
It can. Believe it or not, it's so simple that the install time on it's about 3 hours.
Okay.
Yeah. It's really a bolt-on, like, unbolt the cover, unbolt your exhaust pipes, pop your tank off so you can change the injectors, and then bolt this thing on with 6 bolts and put on the belt. And it's very simple. It's like, it takes about 3 hours to install. But this is a case where I'm not, like, we talk about marketing, and I'm just like, you market first by designing great product, right? This is a product that solves a horsepower problem on Harley Davidsons, and it's designed so it's beautiful and not offensive looking, right? And there's nothing else like it. So we haven't done any marketing push on it other than just like a mini website online and a Facebook page. And we already have like certain bike builders. Have you heard of Arlen Ness?
It's not in my world.
Okay, well, he's probably the most famous Harley Davidson bike builder in the United States, right? His company is basically run by his son now, Corey Ness, who's an accomplished bike builder himself. Well, we get calls from him saying, "Hey, when's your product ready? I'm doing a project bike. It's my own bike that I'm going to be building, and it's going to be covered by the magazine, and I want to put your product on there." It's sort of like instant validation.
Yeah, right.
And it's because we built a great product. I guess there's good product, there's great product, and then there's just like paradigm shifting, game changing product. So, when we talk about product development and product sales and, as a shop and you're trying to do more products, you got to realize it's the combination of certain products are singles, certain products are doubles, certain products are triples, and certain products are home runs, and other products are grand slams. Mm-hmm. Right? And just try to do more triples and up.
Right. To make a game-changing product like that, you said you spent like 2 years designing. Is that a common time period?
No.
To get a product to market?
Well,
from scratch to distribution.
Depends what the product is.
Sure.
Before, like the intake manifolds would take us, the first intake manifold took us about 18 months to 2 years. Right? And now an intake manifold if we focused on just one singular intake manifold, we could probably finalize the design in 1 month and probably have the tooling ready in another 60 to 90 days after that, pull first articles, approve first articles. So now we could probably do it in 6 months. Yeah, I'm like, as we're talking, there's like a lot of stuff I'm thinking that we haven't even talked about. We talked about like inventory turns. And so when we start talking about product, you have to start looking at cash flows and inventory turns and things like that. See, I could give you anecdotal stories about just Craftworks, right? So Skunk's been around for a while, but Craftworks is only, 4 or 5 years old right now, right?
You guys bought Jackson?
We started.
Is that what I understand?
We started out with Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
And then
with Jackson, or do they still exist? I don't do that.
They started up Jackson Racing again.
Okay.
Right? So the story on that is they wanted to promote the Rotrex supercharger kit in the U.S.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so they teamed up with, I forgot what the name of the motorcycle company is. I forgot the name of the parent company, but the motorcycle company was, have you heard of a motorcycle company called Jardine?
No.
They make exhaust pipes. They're based in Corona. And they came out with like a fit kit when they were trying to come out with the new supercharger systems, but they had a falling out with Jardine. And so he came to me and it's like, let's start this company. Like, I'm like, okay, well, here I have a partner who's not his first time to the dance. Like, he built a supercharger company before, so it should be easy enough for him to do it again, right? Mm-hmm. So we partnered up. Basically, Group A funded the cash in the facility, and then he said, well, I want to call it Jackson Racing. I'm like, well, there's more than one party that brings something to the table. I think we should just pick a common name and start a new brand. So we came up with the name Craftworks, which basically means power plant in German.
Okay.
And we started working, and he was developing kits, and he was given sole creative license, and basically the head of development. Him and his team, he had a machinist fabricator that he brought on board, and all getting paid premium prices. I think his base salary was $150, and his machinist salary was like $80, $85.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm thinking, okay, well, they'll come out with product, and it'll start kicking off cash soon enough. Like, I'm looking for a payback, in a couple years or, 2 years, maybe break even on the deal. And what I started realizing was his development capabilities were far from what he claimed, right? My own team's development capabilities far and exceeded, his team's capabilities. And we started seeing things where he would need all this work done by my team. Well, I said, that's fine. If I put my machinists, if I put my fabricators, I put up my stuff on your project, then we need to have some sort of internal service agreement where X amount of hours logged by Craftworks by, where the work's done by Group A employees, Craftworks, accumulates a debt with Group A. Like, don't even need to pay me right away. We could just do it. It's a soft cost. Like, I'll shoulder the costs of doing it, but it'll just be on the book as debt and stuff like that.
Do you find that your business partner in this situation speaks the language that you speak, or are you over his head in the way that you're structuring your business deals? Right? Is he a technical guy and doesn't get this? Right?
Yeah,
or is he speaking your language?
I would assume that after being in business all those years, that he was understanding it. I think he was understanding it. I don't think the fallout or the issues I had with him were because of a business knowledge as opposed to just personality and ethics, Mm-hmm. And so I pumped a whole lot of cash in there to get this thing going, and basically the burn rate by the founders he was taking a draw, I wasn't taking a draw, but his employees and his own draw was like sucking the cash out of the project, and they weren't selling enough. And they weren't, like, his son was responsible for all the sales. His son was doing sales and customer service, and they weren't generating enough revenue. So obviously every single month with Craftworks was negative cash flow. Right. And it finally got to the point where he needed a cash infusion. Like, hey, we're going to come out with the 06 Civic kit and the Miata kits or whatever, but obviously we need more cash to be able to do that. And I said, well, I am willing to put cash in the business, but I'm unwilling to put more cash in the business until we have a clear accounting as to where we are at this point. Right.
Right.
And he was just unwilling to do that. Like, he did not want to recognize. So he happily used my staff when he needed to, but he was unwilling to recognize the service agreement or the debt. Right. And I just kept trying to get him to come to the table, email after email. Here's an Excel spreadsheet. This is my calculation between cash that I've put in, soft costs, and, different things. We're at this total number. And I think the total number was around $1 million. Right. And, I said, look, in the interest of this project and being your partner, I'm willing to paint in broad strokes. I'll write off a lot of these soft costs, like I'll basically, I was willing to reduce the bill by like 300 or 400,000. It's like, I'll just write stuff off in big broad strokes so we can just keep going. Right. And he was just unwilling to have that conversation. And then he disappeared for a while. Right. He said, oh, I got to go to Colorado because his family lives in Colorado. Him and his son were out here in California. His son continued to work in customer service and sales. And then Oscar disappeared. He said he was in Colorado. Then one weekend, he comes in with his son. He clears out his office. His son clears out his desk. They clear out all their tools. They leave the facility, and I find out the very following Monday that they opened up Jackson Racing down the street, or across town, and that's what he was doing for the last month. He was working on Jackson Racing projects and securing a location and setting up shop.
So it's interesting to hear that these types of things haven't made you like super skeptical of people, but Yeah,
it's funny because here's somebody that people would consider an icon or a legend in the industry, and I worked with him. Basically, his development capabilities were limited. His business knowledge was definitely not on par with mine. And I would attribute much of his prior success to maybe dumb luck, right time, right place.
Sure timing.
Right. And it's funny because because he had shares in the company, he wanted to squat on the shares of Craftworks. I just said, okay, that's fine. If you're going to do Jackson Racing, just sign over all your shares in Craftworks and go do your thing. Right. And we'll just call it a day. But he's just like, no, I'm not going to sign over my shares in Craftworks. And I'm going to keep doing Jackson. So he wanted to double dip. Like he wanted to hedge his bet. Like if Jackson didn't work out, at least he had another bet. Like, he doubled down on he split his bet. I said, oh, well, that.
So how does that play out?
So we end up in mediation per our operating agreement. So you got to have an operating agreement if you're a business.
Mm-hmm.
And it says
mediation non-legal.
No, it's legal.
So
it goes to third party.
But okay.
It goes to mediation, and so like you have a couple things. You have mediation where you basically go. It's usually you go before like a retired judge, and he tries to get everybody to settle, and everybody just
right. And you agree on if whatever he says is the ultimatum.
Right. The other non-court one would be binding arbitration, where somebody actually makes a decision and makes a judgment that both parties agree to, but it's still not in the court system.
Yeah, I guess that's what I meant by non-legal. I mean non.
Right. So we had mediation and not a binding arbitration. In the mediation, I just busted out this handy piece of paper. I said, "This is a personal guarantee. You owe me like $700,000 at this point." And he was shocked that I had that piece of paper. Like, where did you get that? Well, you signed it. I'm not going to go into this deal without protecting myself. We're gonna share in the upside and we're gonna share in the downside. So I have this personal guarantee. And then when he saw that, then he was like immediately like just signed over his shares. And I said, like, I don't even want you to I don't want your debt. Like, I don't even bother paying me back. Just like stay out.
Go away.
Stay out of my way. Like, don't make competing products for like 2 years. I forgot how many months it was. Like, he can't make a competing product for products that were developed while he was at Kraftwerks. Like, he couldn't, he had to walk away from it, like, and not compete with like similar product immediately. Mm-hmm. It was funny because within 2.5 years of his departure, we re-engineered every single kit to lower the cost of goods on every single kit. Every single kit ended up making more power, right? And we put it into our distribution channels. And in 2.5 years, we had a 700% increase on the Kraftwerks side, just by clearing this bad partner out of the way. You got to get out of the way of good people. So like when he was out of the way of my development team and my sales team and my marketing team and my management team, when he got out of the way, we increased by 700%. This year will be slightly over 3 years from when he left, and we should be up 1,300% over his best year at Kraftwerks. So it was funny because the supercharger distributor in Denmark, Rotrex, when I called him to tell him what was going on, he was just like, well, we'll still. I said, I just need to confirm that I can still buy the product at the same prices that we're purchasing at. And he's just like, yes, at the bare minimum, we'll honor that agreement. We will also be selling to Jackson Racing the same product, at the same price. And then he goes to me, I don't think it's going to be as easy as you think it's going to be. And I'm like, fuck, like Oscar must have brainwashed these Danes, like this guy's talking shit to me already. I'm like, hey, you know what? It's not my style to paint a picture of blue skies. I just say, give me 18 months and I promise you I will be your largest distributor in the world. Right. And I put my team on it, head down, 18 months. We're by far the largest distributor in the world right now. And he just consistently goes back. It's just like, yeah, we are just so impressed and surprised that you're able to do that. I said, that's because like, I'm not about bullshitting. It's like, there's no magic to this. This is all basic mechanics, like Oscar's, hand waving.
I feel like the mechanics is the minimum is only a portion of it, and your distribution channels are in place, and those things aren't in place for Jackson Racing. I feel like that's a huge resource that you've developed for yourself over the years. Right?
Well, our Kraftwerks dealers our skunk dealers and our Kraftwerks dealers actually aren't the same customers.
Okay.
It's interesting. It's like a different mix because,
But you're well versed in that distribution model, so speaking the language and who's who to contact. I guess I'm picturing WDs just in a different market.
Yeah, that's kind of true. But we're mainly selling to retailers. It mainly goes directly out to retailers and tuning shops.
Okay.
Yeah, and Yeah, I would say Kraftwerks is our business unit that has the most potential right now, because the Harley Davidson is going to be in the Kraftwerks side of things, and the Harley Davidson alone should be 50% of Skunk.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Dude.
So like, I'm having fun.
Look, you're like Neo in the Matrix, man. You're just fucking seeing it. You just like it's all zeros and ones, and you're just like, I fucking get it. Hey, right.
Hey, I went through some like times where I was totally burnt out on the industry. Like in '06 and '07, I was probably still dealing with the stupid lawsuit, dealing with tons of like unfair competitors and stuff like that in the marketplace. I actually did a bunch of side projects just to, almost look for a way out of the automotive industry. If I was to say what was my mission statement or what is our hedgehog concept, our hedgehog concept is we're really good with things that go zoom. We're really good with making mechanical, like badass mechanical stuff, whether it's for cars or go-karts or ATVs or, whatever.
Physical products.
It doesn't matter. Like, cars could blow up. Every car in the world could blow up today and we could transition into motorcycle stuff. No problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I proved that in 2006 where I had a buddy who was running a satellite factory team for Suzuki, and he wanted me to help him make his bikes go faster. So I designed a bunch of Suzuki GSXR 600 cams for him, and I did valve train for him, and he went to Daytona and finished in 4th place, only behind factory Honda bikes. So he was the highest placing Suzuki in the Daytona 200, racing on an engine with car parts made by a car manufacturer, or motorcycle parts made by a car manufacturer. So that kind of proved to me that an engine's an engine.
Yeah. Where do all these connections come from? Like, I mean, just being within the industry, where are you bumping elbows with all these homies?
Oh, well, I ride motorcycles. Oh, I rode a lot of motorcycles back then, So just friends that were into motorcycles. That simple, nothing too complicated,
Yeah.
You gotta expand your circles a bit.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's one of the goals of this podcast.
Right.
Yeah.
The Honda world tends to be too. The word to use is insular. It only looks in on itself. It doesn't really look outside for inspiration, or not. It doesn't do it enough. It's more like it's a monkey see, monkey do. There's few people that come up with
It's crazy.
Yeah.
That's so true.
There's few people that come up and test new recipes, and then as soon as those recipes are known to everybody else, then it's sort of like everybody's doing the same thing.
Yeah. I'm going to end this conversation with how do we connect with you and your company?
Yeah, skunk2.com. You can go on my Facebook and add me as a friend or whatever. I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good at answering, responding to anybody who has a genuine question. Group A Engineer. It's group-a-eng.com. So groupaengineering.com, skunk2.com, craftworksusa.com, gramsperformance.com. Yeah.
David, thank you so much for all the insight.
You didn't ask me about my favorite shop tool.
What's your favorite shop tool?
Does it have to be a shop tool?
What's your favorite tool?
My favorite tool is my brain, my hands, my pencil, and a piece of paper.
Not very technology-based.
I don't need to... What I do with my my brain and a pencil, I just give it to somebody else and I let them figure out the technology stuff,
Fair enough. I just needed to get that on record, so now we can just continue to.
Yeah, it's not a picoscope. I don't even know what a picoscope is. I'm guessing it's like a digital fluke meter, you know.
Yeah, it's just voltage over time, sure, but really finite measurements and really, really small units of time. It's fucking sweet.
Yeah, but how is that different than just a standard digital oscope that you can buy a card for your laptop for?
It is for your laptop. It's a laptop-based software with just a piece of hardware.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all it is.
Okay.
It's a laptop-based oscilloscope.
Okay. Oh yeah. Digital oscope's been around forever. So.
Sure. So I'm not familiar with that one. I'm familiar with this one, and it's just the way that it presents data. It allows you the software allows you to do maths, and it's just well supported, and it's a pretty cool piece of hardware and software.
Cool. It's like you said, it allows you to do math.
Maths. Yeah. So like you could take a crank trigger and turn it into graphable RPM.
Okay.
Right. So you could take, every time you saw the cam trigger come across, then you would say that's 1, right? And you could turn that into a maths channel, and then when you're watching the cam and crank triggers, you could also watch engine RPM, for example. So you could turn a crank trigger into a engine RPM display. That's just one example. So the software allows you to do some things. That's all. Pretty cool.
Yeah, it's funny. I've never been interested in the electronic side.
Yeah?
Yeah, but I'm incubating a project on the electronic side. Yeah, I got some smart people on the electronic side. Like, they've already done a lot of stuff in the industry that just people don't know because they're the behind the scenes people.
Yeah.
But basically my team there's nothing in the market right now that my team could like whip up.
Watching your interaction with the AmericaWorks thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's been really interesting. Your take on the AmericaWorks thing is like, congratulations, you grabbed some control arms, you fucking machined the bushings out, and you put a spherical bearing in it. Like, that's not revolutionary.
Right. That's exactly right. If you're creating something from nothing, then you have something that's protectable, at least from a design patent perspective. Right? Somebody could change up the look a little bit or whatever and design around it, but you made it that much harder for them to do because most people that copy stuff just want to do one-for-one copies.
Right.
Okay.
So they don't have any design ability.
Right.
Or whatever. They're just going to rip your shit off.
If I had patented, let's say, my lower control arm in 2004 in terms of the bushings and how the beam was shaped and everything, and I left the inside. So, for example, I could draw a picture of my control arm, and then where I have circle cutouts in the middle, I could do those in dotted line. And so that basically says it could be any shape, any pattern, any shape within this exterior shape and geometry would be infringing on my patent. If I had done that in 2004, every single one of these Blackworks, China copies or whatever would be infringing on that design patent.
If you would have left it vague.
Well, no, that's how you would do it. I'm basically doing a design patent on the how the bushings and the exterior looks, and then the cutouts in the middle are just extraneous. So I just do those as dotted lines because those aren't what I'm protecting. So if I do the circle cutouts and dotted lines, basically I'm protecting any shape within that cutout area.
What's patentable about a lower control arm?
The design.
But can you elaborate?
The look and feel.
If it's a piece of billet with some bushings and some steel collars in it, and the center to center locations of those three parts they're on like one plane. I mean, I'm just trying to understand the look and feel. Like, can you elaborate any more, or is it just a chunk of aluminum with 3 hole centers and a rubber bushing?
You're not protecting the functionality, right? You're protecting your design. So before I designed that lower control arm, nothing looked like that. Nothing was similar to that. Even the exterior shape, like a factory control arm is this metal piece with a pressed in, metal sleeve type of bushing, rubber
stamped steel or cast.
Right. So when I came out with my control arm, it had a very specific exterior shape. It had very specific looking bushings, had very specific looking center pins. Right? Nothing looked like it. All I had to really do was protect the external geometry and design of that control arm, and then I would have protected myself from anybody who just tried to make different cutouts in the middle, right? So you got Blackworks Blackworks that has little triangular cutouts, and you have Buddy Club that has like little triangular cutouts, and then you have all sorts of China stuff that have different cutouts.
Yeah,
that would have deterred most of the copies out there.
You said your ad budget was like $30,000. What's your annual fuck you attorney seeking patents budget?
You
know what I mean?
No, I don't pay to enforce my patents. To enforce my patents, it's zero. Right? So I told you that they do it on a contingency. They go after people that infringe on our patents. They file suit. And then they get a settlement. They cover, so after they get a settlement, the costs of the suit are covered. So the filing fees and the process serving fees or whatever, they're paid back to me, and then they take a percentage of what's left.
Okay, but the initial go after the suit, you have to pay. That's not something that the firm.
Yeah, it's like I cover costs. So the costs. Mm-hmm. The cost to file a federal complaint, like $600 or something like that.
Okay, so it's not in the tens of thousands.
No, and then all of our complaints are pretty much boilerplate, So it's not like he's writing it each time, because everybody's copying the same shit, right? The moneymaker for me on patent infringement has been the EF camber kit, the EFDA TSX front camber kit. I actually have a utility patent and a whole bunch of design patents protecting the ball joint design. So I have 4 patents that protect that one design. So it's like a patent minefield, And we've settled out with a lot of people. We've settled out with DME. Have you heard of them?
Yeah.
Yeah. We settled out with Hard Race.
Okay.
A couple other people. I think we have a complaint against Megan right now. We settled with Godspeed. I look at all these companies just like fucking fucking low lives. It's like get some talent. Just design some shit on your own. Stop riding my coattails and surfing in my wake.
It's fucking crazy that there's that many that you're just, as you're saying those, I'm remembering those companies. That's fucking,
it's like,
those fucking,
I do a lot of cycling, and we call them wheel suckers. So you're riding out in front. It takes 30% more energy to ride in front of a pace line, right? And wheel suckers are the guys that never take a turn in the front.
So they're just constantly drafting.
They're just sucking wheels the whole time.
Yeah.
So there's just I can't stand the people in our industry that are just like cockroaches,
That's all I got for you. Holy shit, that was 5 hours.
Well,
what do you think about that? Are you satisfied or unsatisfied?
I don't know, because I'm not looking for answers. I'm just telling my story.
Yeah,
my story doesn't change. You gotta prune this into something that's interesting and meaningful to your customers or your listeners.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's something else that I wanted to touch on that I forgot. So give me
We're gonna do it again.
Give me a sec. Let me see if I can think of. Yeah, we covered a lot of stuff. I think touching on cash flows. We touched a lot on intellectual property and IP protection, and technology and investing in your business and equipment, you know.
Cash flow and inventory management I'd like to talk about, but not today.
Right, yeah. Well, that's actually pretty simple, because what you want is to put it in simple terms, you want to look at your inventory and you say, how many turns am I getting out of this per year? That's what they use, right? So,
right. Well, what's an acceptable inventory turn per year? And I mean, that's dependent on other factors. What do you like to see with the inventory turns?
When you're dealing with overseas stuff and there's a possibility to get delayed really easily, I always err on the side of keeping more stock than going back ordered. So that requires me to carry more inventory, and if I carry more inventory, I'm naturally going to have less turns.
Mm-hmm.
So my goal would be 5 turns on the warehouse.
Every year, 5 turns a year?
5 turns. So if I got $1 million in stock, I want to be doing $5 million in revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Wow. Well, inventory is calculated at cost.
Right. So the other thing is
more than $5 million.
What you want to do for turns in a small thing, you obviously need to be much higher, because you don't want to lock in your cash. Especially if you're just buying and reselling other products, then you should have very high turns. I would say, have a target of maybe, if I was in a business where I was like reselling products that the manufacturer was keeping in stock, I'd probably go, I'd probably shoot for 10 turns. I could tell you, like a product business like ours, if an investment banker came in and he did an analysis, he'd want me to be at 6 turns. That's kind of like a benchmark.
Cool. That's enough for me to marinate on. I have an engine to build, and I'm going to go into the build room and build that engine, and I'm going to think about all the things that we talked about today.
I gotta do an airbox.
Cool. David.
Yes.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thanks for listening to Do It for a Living. You can find out more about this guest, this show, and even details about what we just talked about at our website, doitforaliving.net. Check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/doitforaliving and tell us who you want to hear from. And most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Click subscribe. Do it now. Seriously. I'll wait while you grab your phone. Open up the podcast app, tap the subscribe button. When you subscribe, you help us gain momentum and attract more high-level guests. Thanks for listening, and good luck.